Official report, Galactic Species Threat Assessment Humans. Classification, highly restricted. Author, Senior Threat Analyst Zex'Tarill, Galactic Security Council. Look, I don't get paid enough for this. 27 standard cycles of evaluating species threat levels, and I've never had to file so many incident reports in such a short time. Not for the caffeine and their literal bloodlust. Not for the hive-minded Vespula. Not even for the silicon-based lithoids who consider most carbon life forms to be squishy inconveniences. No, it took humanity, those bipedal mammals from that unremarkable water world in the Orion Spur, to break my perfect record of threat containment. When humans first achieved faster-than-light travel and stumbled into our galactic community, every security protocol we had was immediately activated. You should have seen the council chamber that day, tentacles flailing, exoskeletons clicking nervously, photosynthetic members literally wilting from stress. The harmonious union of sentient species hadn't faced a potentially hostile new civilization in over 800 cycles. Our initial threat assessment focused on their military capabilities, and why wouldn't it? Their historical archives are essentially an uninterrupted sequence of conflicts. Their entertainment broadcasts glorify combat. Their diplomatic envoys arrived in vessels clearly derived from military designs. Even their formal greeting involves pressing together their manipulator appendages in what our xenopsychologists determined was a ritualistic test of strength. But, and I cannot emphasize this enough, we were monitoring the wrong threat vector entirely. It wasn't their soldiers we should have feared. It was their engineers. I'm sure by now you've all heard whispers about the incident at Proxima Station. The official report runs to 17,000 pages and includes 600 technical appendices, but that sterile documentation doesn't capture the sheer existential dread that rippled through the galaxy when we realized what humans are truly capable of. This is my attempt to explain why, as of this cycle, human engineering solutions are classified as a Class 4 galactic security threat, right alongside antimatter weaponry and artificial intelligence development. May the stars have mercy on us all. Our first formal diplomatic contact with humans occurred at the neutral trading post orbiting Barnard's star. The human vessel laughably named Peaceful Envoy, despite having weapon hardpoints barely concealed beneath cosmetic panels, docked with considerable awkwardness. Their captain, a stern-faced individual called Commander Jackson, emerged with a delegation of similarly uniformed officers. I remember thinking they looked so rigid, so formal, so predictable. Our security teams had compiled extensive threat assessments based on intercepted transmissions. We knew their military hierarchy, their tactics, their weapons capabilities. Commander Jackson was exactly what we expected: disciplined, cautious, and constantly scanning for threats. What we didn't account for was Tina Alvarez, their chief engineer. While Commander Jackson laboriously worked through the formal diplomatic protocols with the Union representatives, Alvarez wandered off from the main delegation. Our security feeds show her examining a standard atmospheric recycler with an expression I would later learn to recognize as professional curiosity. Within minutes, she had removed an access panel that 3 different species security protocols had declared maintenance sealed. "Hey, you guys know this thing is running at like 60% efficiency, right?" she called out, interrupting a formal speech about peace between worlds. "Your coolant lines are all gunked up. I could fix this in like 20 minutes if you've got a standard hydrospanner or whatever you call it." The diplomatic team froze. Commander Jackson's face displayed that peculiar reddening that humans exhibit during stress responses. The Union representatives stared in horror at this casual violation of equipment that, while not precisely sacred, was certainly not meant to be disassembled by visiting aliens. "Engineer Alvarez," Commander Jackson said through gritted teeth, "please rejoin the delegation and stop dismantling our host's life support systems." "It's not life support, it's just an air freshener," she replied, already elbow deep in the recycler's innards. "And it's not working right. I'm helping." This, I would learn, is the fundamental truth about human engineers that makes them so dangerous. They genuinely believe they are helping. The diplomatic reception continued, with Alvarez reluctantly rejoining the group. But 22 minutes later, the atmospheric recycler began functioning at 127% of its designed capacity. 2 other recyclers in adjacent corridors spontaneously synchronized with it, creating an efficient cross-flow that reduced power consumption by 31%. The Union's head of station maintenance, a methodical arachnoid named T-Cly Click, spent 3 days trying to figure out how she had accomplished this with standard components. When he finally gave up and asked her directly, Alvarez shrugged and said, "I just bypassed the secondary regulator and rerouted through the tertiary buffer. Basic stuff. Your design was unnecessarily complicated. That recycler is still running at 127% efficiency. We cannot figure out how. We've built exact duplicates of what she did, and they immediately fail or explode. This should have been our warning. This should have triggered every alarm in our security protocols. But instead, we continued to focus on their military capabilities, their kinetic weapons, their nuclear arsenals, their tactical doctrines. We completely missed the true threat until it was too late." 6 months after first contact, the Union Council approved a cultural and technological exchange program. The humans would send a team to assist with upgrades to Proxima Station, our primary research facility in their home system. In return, we would share certain non-military technologies with them. The human team arrived aboard the transport vessel Helpful Hand. The name should have been another warning. The team was led by Marcus Okonkwo, a human with 15 advanced degrees and a reputation for what his superiors called innovative problem-solving. He brought 5 other engineers, each specializing in different systems. "We're just here to help streamline a few things," Okonkwo assured the station director, a cephalopod diplomat named Glorksik. "Small improvements, nothing major." The first 3 days went exactly as planned. The human engineers observed our systems, asked questions, and made modest suggestions that our technical teams could easily understand and evaluate. Everyone relaxed. Commander Jackson, who had been assigned as military liaison, even commented that this exchange was proceeding with unprecedented smoothness. On the 4th day, Okonkwo and his team requested permission to make what they called minor adjustments to the station's power distribution system. "It's just a tiny bottleneck," Okonkwo explained, pointing to a safety buffer that prevented power surges from cascading through critical systems. "This redundancy is actually creating inefficiency. We can reroute through the secondary grid and increase your overall power output by at least 20%. Glorksik, impressed by the human's previous work, approved the modification. Why wouldn't he? 20% more power efficiency meant more research capacity, more life support redundancy, more everything. What we didn't understand, what we couldn't have understood, was that humans don't think in terms of stable systems. They think in terms of problems to solve, and they solve them one at a time, with no regard for the complex interdependencies that might exist. The minor adjustment to the power distribution system worked exactly as Okonkwo had predicted. Power output increased by 23%, actually exceeding his estimate. But this created a thermal management issue in Section 14, which another engineer named Rodriguez fixed. By redirecting coolant from the tertiary backup system that wasn't doing anything anyway. This created a pressure differential in the station's liquid circulation system, which Engineer Patel solved by just boosting the pump output. It's only running at like half capacity anyway. The increased pump output created vibrations in the station's structural frame, which Engineer Chang dampened by just tightening these loose coupling joints and adding a little reinforcement here and there. The structural reinforcement changed the station's mass distribution, which affected its orbital stability, which Engineer Yoshida corrected by tweaking the stabilizer thrusters. They were way over-engineered anyway. And then, 16 hours after the initial power adjustment, Engineer Wilson noticed that the life support system was working way too hard and decided to just streamline the atmospheric processing sequence. That was when Proxima Station achieved what humans now call technical cascading resonance and what the rest of the galaxy calls the incident. Every system on the station, power, life support, structural integrity, computational nodes. Even the food recyclers suddenly began operating at 150% of their design capacity. Alarms blared throughout the station. Emergency protocols activated and then immediately deactivated as the safety systems themselves were caught in the resonance. For 27 minutes, Proxima Station became something no engineer in the galaxy had ever seen before. A self-optimizing system that continually reconfigured itself to achieve maximum efficiency regardless of safety parameters. When the resonance finally stabilized, Proxima Station was operating at 213% of its original design capacity. Nothing was damaged. No one was injured. All systems were functional. And absolutely no one could explain how it worked anymore. The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council convened 3 days after the incident. I was assigned to present the preliminary findings, which was rather like being selected to tell a Kragan berserker that you accidentally stepped on its egg clutch. Distinguished representatives, I began, trying to keep my dorsal membranes from fluttering in distress. We face an unprecedented situation. The human engineers have fundamentally altered Proxima Station in ways we cannot reverse or even fully comprehend. The Hive representatives' antennae twitched violently. Cannot comprehend. Are you suggesting these humans have technology beyond our understanding? No, Representative, I said. That's what makes this situation so disturbing. They used our components, our tools, our basic engineering principles. But they applied them in ways that violate our fundamental assumptions about system design. Explain, demanded the Silicon Collective's crystal matrix. I pulled up the schematics of the station's power distribution system before and after the humans' modifications. As you can see, they've created feedback loops that should cause catastrophic failures, but instead create stable amplification effects. They've removed safety buffers that our engineers consider essential, claiming they were just getting in the way. They've cross-connected systems that should be strictly isolated from each other. The Aquatic Union's representative bubbled anxiously. But the station functions. Not only functions, I confirmed, but operates at more than twice its original capacity with no increase in resource consumption. We've run 12 different diagnostic sequences, and none of them can identify any flaw or potential failure point. So what is the problem? Asked the photosynthetic conclave's towering representative. The mechanical consciousness answered before I could. The problem is that we do not understand why it works. We cannot replicate these modifications elsewhere because we do not comprehend the underlying principles. If something were to malfunction, we would be unable to repair it. Precisely, I said. And when our engineers asked the humans to explain their methodology, they said, and I quote directly from the transcript, "We just fixed the stuff that wasn't working right. No big deal." The council chamber erupted in multiple species versions of alarmed exclamations. The Grand Arbiter raised all 4 limbs for silence. What do the humans say about this incident? I activated the recording of Chief Engineer Okonkwo's official statement. Look, I'm not sure what everyone's so worked up about, his hologram said with a casual shrug. We just made some efficiency improvements. Everything's running better now. You're welcome, by the way. If you want, we could take a look at your other stations too. I bet we could get similar results across the board. I paused the recording as another wave of alarm swept through the chamber. As you can see, I continued, the humans genuinely do not understand our concern. They view what happened as a success story. They're actually confused by our reaction. After 16 hours of debate, the Council enacted Emergency Protocol 147B, the Human Engineering Containment Protocol. All human engineers were restricted from accessing any critical union in infrastructure without direct supervision and prior approval from the Council itself. When we informed the humans of this decision, their diplomatic courts expressed formal understanding and agreement. Their engineers, however, were baffled. So let me get this straight, Engineer Patel said during the official notification. We made everything work better, And now we're being treated like we broke something? It is not that you broke anything, explained the cephalopod representative with remarkable patience. It is that you altered fundamental systems in ways that defy our understanding. Well, yeah, Engineer Rodriguez interjected. That's kind of what engineering is. You see a problem, you fix it. Sometimes the fix isn't in the manual. And that, perhaps, is the most succinct explanation of why human engineers terrify the galaxy. To them, the manual is merely a suggestion, a starting point. Sometimes not even that. For nearly a standard cycle, the protocol kept human engineers safely contained. There were minor incidents. An engineer named Blackwell accidentally increased the efficiency of a Union hydroponics facility by 40% while supposedly just touring it. An engineer named Becky somehow optimized the hive's communications network while explaining why he found it interesting. But nothing approaching the scale of Proxima Station occurred. Then the void resonance cascade hit the Arcturus nexus. For those with appropriate security clearance, the details of this crisis are well documented. For everyone else, yes, suffice it to say that a fundamental distortion in spacetime threatened to collapse 17 major transit hubs and potentially destabilize a significant portion of the galactic arm. The Union's best scientific minds developed dozens of theoretical approaches. The most promising would take 19 months to implement, by which time the cascade would have already caused irreparable damage. That was when Ambassador Chen made her infamous proposal to the Council. "Distinguished representatives," she said, standing before the emergency session with remarkable composure, "I understand your concerns about our engineering methods. But right now, you don't need careful, by-the-book solutions. You need people who can look at impossible problems and find solutions that shouldn't work but somehow do. You need human engineers." The debate lasted less than an hour, a record for the notoriously deliberative Council. With the fate of 17 systems hanging in the balance, the Human Engineering Containment Protocol was temporarily suspended. A team of 9 human engineers, led by the now infamous Marcus Okonkwo, was granted emergency access to the primary Arcturus transit hub. They were given complete schematics of the hub's systems and full briefings on the void resonance cascade. So basically, Okonkwo summarized after a 4-hour technical briefing, spacetime is getting wobbly and messing up your fancy transit network. The mechanical consciousness representative spent 11 minutes explaining why this characterization was dangerously oversimplified before Okonkwo cut them off. Yeah, quantum fields and dimensional stability and all that. But the bottom line is something's vibrating at the wrong frequency and making everything else vibrate wrong too, right? When the representative reluctantly confirmed this extremely simplified description, Okonkwo grinned. Cool. So we just need to dampen the vibrations or counter-vibrate or change the resonance frequency. Basic stuff, really. Give me a day to look at your setup. It took the human team 2 days, not 1. For 48 hours they pored over schematics, argued among themselves, and requested increasingly bizarre materials from the station's fabricators. They slept in shifts, sustained by what they called emergency rations. But what our medical teams identified as dangerous stimulants and simple carbohydrates. On the 3rd day, Okonkwo presented their solution. "We're going to build a negative resonance field generator," he explained, pointing to a schematic that looked like it had been drawn by a malfunctioning cleaning drone. Basically, it creates the exact opposite pattern of the cascade, which should cancel it out. "That is not possible," stated the Silicon Collective's representative. "The computational requirements alone would exceed the capacity of our largest quantum arrays." "Yeah, we're not using computers," Engineer Chang said with a dismissive wave. "Too slow. We're building an analog system." "Analog?" The photosynthetic representative's leaves actually turned brown at the edges. "You cannot be serious." "Dead serious," Okonkwo confirmed. "Digital systems try to approximate analog reality anyway. We're cutting out the middleman." Despite vehement objections from virtually every scientific authority in the Union, the Council reluctantly approved the human plan. The alternative was to watch 17 systems collapse into space-time anomalies that would render them permanently uninhabitable. The human team built their device in 13 hours, using parts scavenged from across the station. The final construction looked like, and I quote directly from my official report, a drunken xenoarchaeologist's interpretation of ancient plumbing, covered in random blinking lights and held together with a substance the humans called duct tape. When they activated it, every monitoring system in the station temporarily failed. When the systems came back online 11 seconds later, the void resonance cascade was simply gone. The humans celebrated with a ritual that involved consuming neurotoxins, which they called beer, and slapping each other on the back repeatedly. The Union's scientific community spent the next 6 months studying the device, which continued to function perfectly despite violating at least 17 fundamental laws of physics. When they finally asked Okonkwo to explain how he had conceived of the solution, he shrugged and said, "I dunno, it just seemed like the obvious approach. Trial and error, you know." We did not know. We still do not know. Following the Arcturus incident, as it is now formally classified, the Council modified the Human Engineering Containment Protocol rather than terminating it entirely. Human engineers are now permitted to access Union infrastructure, but only under specific conditions. 1. All work must be preceded by detailed documentation of the existing system. 2. All proposed changes must be thoroughly documented before implementation. 3. At least 3 non-human engineers must be present during any modification. 4. The humans must attempt to explain their methodology in terms other species can understand. The humans have accepted these conditions with what they call good grace, though Engineer Rodriguez was heard muttering something about bureaucratic nonsense slowing down progress. In my final assessment as Senior Threat Analyst, I must emphasize that human military capabilities, while concerning, are fundamentally comprehensible. We understand weapons, we understand tactics. We understand the concept of causing harm to achieve strategic objectives. What we do not understand, what makes human engineers so deeply terrifying to the galactic community, is their casual relationship with the impossible. To a human engineer, the laws of physics are not inviolable constants but rather suggestions to be worked around when inconvenient. The difference between cannot be done and hasn't been done yet is, to them, merely a question of how much time they have and how much coffee, another neurotoxin they regularly consume, is available. Most disturbing of all is their concept of kludge, a solution they themselves acknowledge as awkward, inelegant, potentially dangerous, and yet functionally adequate for the immediate problem. The galaxy has advanced for millennia based on elegant, thoroughly tested, carefully documented engineering principles. Humans advance by seeing what works and then retroactively trying to explain why. And yet, despite all this, I find myself reluctantly recommending that the Union continue to work with human engineers. Their methods are chaotic, their documentation abysmal, and their casual disregard for established principles deeply unsettling. But they solve problems we cannot, see solutions we miss, and achieve results we thought impossible. Just keep them away from anything you don't want improved without warning. End of official report. Personal addendum: I have just been informed that Engineer Yoshida, while touring our central traffic control hub for cultural exchange purposes, noticed that our faster-than-light communication relays seemed a little sluggish and has proposed a quick 5-minute fix that would allegedly reduce transmission latency by 60%. I am officially requesting immediate retirement, effective now. Office of Personnel note: request denied. Senior Analyst Zex'Tarill has been reassigned as head of the newly formed Human Engineering Oversight Division. May the stars have mercy on their soul.